Sacred Heart Hospital is an iconic IDV map where this sort of thing is possible. However, despite the popularity, the map's grey color scheme can feel a bit dull at times. What if we could inject a hint of red into it? No more than that. Oh, no, that's a little bit too much for my taste. But as it turns out, this is Sacred Heart announced all the way back during IDV's late beta phase in October 2017. The vibe of this map was completely different back then. This red fog wasn't changed until 2018, and it's really fascinating to see just how much the map differs from the version of the map that we have in current day. And yes, you can play this map right now. Thanks to Scribbled Ideas and the amazing IDV player named Composer, we have a recreated version of this map that lets us experience this retro map in all of its glory. But sadly, we don't have the original gallows used in place of the current day rocket chairs. Shame. The gallows weren't the only things that were different about IDV's pre-release version. Few players know that IDV was initially named Dangerous Game. Back in mid-2016, a year before Sacred Heart was even announced, Dangerous Game was created at NetEase as an experimental prototype used to train their programmers and game developers. This game's development only took a short 1.5 months and had a cryptic description of to be or not to be. You can see that they took quite a lot of inspiration from a certain other game that we're not going to mention here, but that you are probably very familiar with, that was released around that same year. Although the tone and art style have since evolved, it's intriguing to see how certain elements have been retained until today. Petition to bring back the bed of nails instead of the rocket chairs, anyone? Anyone? It seems that the developers decided to make it a full game at some point and started on the early beta phase of IDV. This was a wild time, spanning from late 2016 to early 2017. The art style went through a significant transformation here, resulting in a look that's more familiar to modern players. However, the gore and horror elements were more pronounced, as seen in this grungy Arms Factory map, where survivors could be hung from gallows instead of rocket chairs. Survivors also had slightly different versions of their iconic items, such as Doctor not using a healing syringe, but instead using some sort of illicit liquid. There were some scrapped concepts for survivors, but some characters that made it to the present day were Hellember and Smiley Face, although with drastically different abilities in the case of Hellember. Hunters could also equip weapons, such as Farm Chainsaw, the Bone Sickle, or the makeshift axe. And that sickle was reportedly made of Hellember's jaw. What? Giga Chad Hellember, anyone? Oh, and they also had equipable add-ons such as the dirty saw blades and pliers and stuff like that. By the end of 2017, the late beta phase began, which introduced customization options for survivors, including necklaces and helmets that provided buffs of some sort and increased movement speed and enhanced heartbeat detection. It seems that survivors could also pick from an assortment of tools found in the diary. These things also seemed to be consumables, but it was really unclear how players could even access these or collect these. Nonetheless, the game was starting to take shape. One thing that I'm glad they changed was that survivors still had normal eyes back then. Really creepy. But how about Sacred Heart's beta version, the whole point of this video? It was also known as Holy Hearts Hospital. But what was different about it? One of the most notable aspects was the sheer number of pallets, which created a multitude of kiting areas and made it extremely difficult for hunters to navigate. There were kiting areas everywhere. You would find it hard to stumble upon an area without any walls, windows, or pallets. This area, that is usually a tad weak in modern Sacred Heart, was crazy back in the beta, and you may also notice the whole fence area is completely absent. When a change that existed in the game until quite late in the game's history was the massive change to the bird cage. Yes, there is no pallet here, but instead there's a one-way window which you can only access from within. It's pretty easy to imagine just how frustrating this would be for modern hunters if they're dealing with survivors like Patient or Toy Merchant in this area, and it's a testament to the game's development team that these changes were made to create a more balanced experience of the game. Yet there are some aesthetic changes that have remained constant until today, such as the TV on the second floor of the hospital that will turn on if Psychologist approaches it, and the operating table nearby that used to have a body on it, which adds to the map's eerie atmosphere for sure. In contrast to the beta version, the current map has achieved a better balance between kiting areas and open spaces that both hunters and survivors have to traverse. Take the double pallet area around the fence section of the map as an example. Remember that we also have a lot more hunters and survivors now with much more impressive abilities than they had in the initial release. Lucky Guy back then had to manually find things in boxes resources to get items. That really wouldn't fly in the modern meta. Modern survivors with the ability to tank multiple hits, fly over walls, jump over windows, and pallets and stuff like that would be incredibly strong on a map where every few steps there is another wall and pallet. While modern maps may have lost some of the chaotic, unbalanced elements of their predecessors, the game has generally become more fair and polished over time, as we see dead zones for survivors located on different maps getting filled in with creative fixes, such as the T-wall area over on Moonlit River Park, or the changes to the Lakeside Village shoreline. One area though where I believe that IDV could make some improvements is in their thematic uniqueness. Arms Factory, Red Church, and the O's Memory still feel very alike. Not to a veteran's eye maybe, but to a beginner's eye they are all a mix of grey, brown, and randomly placed grey walls. A few colour changes here and there and a stronger theme would make them feel way more unique. On that note, a lot of maps have secrets you might not have noticed before, so check out this video over here if you want to learn some of those very secrets.